I'd like to show you how to make the ice cream bar tree block for the Blanket the Town pattern. So here we have a few of them on this blanket. There's one up here. There's one down here. And down at the bottom is the one we're going to make today. Here is the completed tree block. It has a foliage piece, and I'm going to show you how I make the beginning of that piece and some example baubles. It's worked from a chart, and the chart shows all the different stitch types, including increases, decreases, and where to work the baubles. I'm going to start out by casting on 4 stitches. I'll make a slip knot, and I'm going to use a knitted cast on, so I'll insert a needle into the slip knot. I'll insert my right needle into the loop going left to right and making sure the right needle is behind, yarn around the right needle, pull the loop through, twist so that the front of that leg ends up on the front of the needle, and then repeat. Insert left to right through the front loop with the right needle at the back, yarn around, pull a loop through, twist my wrist a little so that the front leg goes on the needle, insert, yarn around, pull through, twist, and place on the left needle. Okay, so now I've got 4 stitches. The first row is a plain knit row. These rows are very short at the beginning until we get some increases done. The next row is knit front and back in the first and last stitch. Knit front, now knit through the back loop. That makes 2 stitches, and then knit, knit till I get to the last stitch, and then knit through the front loop, knit through the back loop. Now I've got 6 stitches. The next row is the same thing. Knit front and back through the first stitch, knit to the last stitch, knit front and back in the last stitch. And then we'll repeat that one more time for one more row. Knit front and back in the first stitch, knit to the last stitch, knit front and back. Now we should have 10 stitches. This would be a good place to count. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, the next row is a plain knit row. No increases on this row. So we're just forming that little curved bottom of the tree top. That's what those increases on the edges are doing. Okay, now on this next row is when we work the first bobble. But in addition to the bobble, we're also going to do increases in the first and the last stitches of the row. So knit front and back, and then knit 2. And now we're going to work the bobble. So we start by inserting our needle knitwise through the next stitch, taking the color for the bobble, clamp it between left index finger and middle finger just to hold it while we take the first stitch. So knit, and do not take the stitch off the needle, just do not slide the stitch that we're working on off. Yarn forward, knit another stitch, yarn forward, knit another stitch. Then turn and bring the yarn between the needles and away from you and knit these stitches. So there's 5 stitches in the bobble color, so knit those. I'll tighten up my loose strand there. Get a little bit more yarn. Now we're going to knit those stitches a separate time. That's the second row, and turn again and knit them one more time. So we've knitted these 5 stitches 3 times. And yarn away from us again, yarn to the back. Now we're going to slip the first 4 stitches one by one, purlwise to the right needle. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to knit the next stitch, give it a little tug, and while tensioning it, insert the left needle left to right through the leg of the first stitch and pull it over the knitted stitch. And the same thing with the second stitch. Could be a little tight, so watch for that. Pull it over, and now the third stitch, pull it over, and now the fourth stitch, and pull it over. Now drop the bobble color and continue knitting the rest of the row with the foliage color. Remembering to make an increase in the last stitch. This will be a knit front and back. Okay. Now, the row after a bobble, we have to do something special. This particular row is a plain knit row, but when we get to the bobble, we need to slip the bobble stitch purlwise. So let's knit over to where the bobble is. And to slip it purlwise, we need to bring the yarn towards us and then insert the right needle right to left through the bobble stitch. And then to continue knitting, we need to bring it between the needles and away from us, and then knit the rest of the row. We're now done with the bobble. The next row is an increase row, so we'll be making a knit front and back in the first stitch and the last stitch of the row. Make sure to count stitches and compare them with the chart as you go along, just to make sure you don't forget to do an increase. Note also that I did not cut the bobble yarn after completing the bobble. I leave it attached and I drape it to the next bobble. The next row is a wrong side row, and it is a plain knit row. Okay, now we have a bobble on this row as well, and we have it's worked on the fourth stitch from the end of the row. The first stitch is a knit front and back, an increase. And again, I'm just reading from the chart. That's how I know what to do. Okay, there's the fourth stitch from the end of the row, so I'll drop my foliage color and pick up my bobble color, and I'm going to drape it from where it emerges after I finish the last bobble to this location where I'm now working a bobble, and I want that to be loose. So one way to make sure it's loose is to kind of pull and stretch this to make sure that it's not constraining me from pulling or stretching it. And that's about the amount of drape that I would like there. Yarn forward, knit again, leave the stitch on the needle, yarn forward, knit again. And now the next 3 rows are going to be knitted in the Bobble color. I'm going to turn after knitting each row. So I'll start by turning. This is my first plain knit row of the Bobble. This is my second row. And now let me get fancy for a second, and I'm going to purl backwards instead of turning. This is equivalent to turning and knitting. I have a separate video on this if you want to see how this is done. I use this for short rows and for any knitting where there's only a few stitches on the needle. There. Okay, so we've now completed our 3 knit rows, and we're going to, with the yarn and back, slip each of the Bobble stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, purlwise to the right needle, and then knit the last Bobble stitch. And then one by one, with the left needle, pick up the slip stitches and pull them over the knitted stitch. Pass slip stitches over, one by one. Okay, I'm now done. I can drop the Bobble yarn, and continuing with the foliage yarn, I'm going to knit to the last stitch and then work my increase. I'm going to see how this Bobble is kind of pushing to the back of the work. I can just push it with my finger to the front. The next row is just a plain knit row, and I have to remember to slip the Bobble stitch purlwise when I get to it. So here it is. So I'm bringing the yarn between the needles and towards me so that I can slip it purlwise. With purl, the yarn is towards us. Slip, oops, slip right off the needle. And then yarn between the needles and away from me again so I can continue knitting, because with knitting the yarn is away from us. There. Now I've got a couple of those Bobbles done, and I think they look okay. So I would just continue reading the chart, working the Bobbles and the increases when I come to them. It's also okay just to choose your own locations for the Bobbles. Maybe you want fewer than what I did. You can also change colors. You don't have to work them all in one color. You could work them in different colors, and that would be kind of fun. Maybe suggesting like a... I've now finished my tree top, and it's time to sew it to the tree block. First, let's just take a look at them. This is the back of the tree block. This is the back of the tree block. That's the front. And this is the tree top, the foliage or whatever you want to call it. That's the back. So I'll start out by placing it onto the block and arranging it in a way that I think looks good. I'm also remembering that this is actually the top and that's the bottom. So I'm going to center it left to right, and then I can choose to put it really anywhere height-wise, right? As long as it is on the block. And so I think that looks good there. And first I'm going to start by pinning it on the right side because I can see that it's oriented and centered correctly on the right side. So I'll put a couple pins just down the middle center area. just to anchor it, but I want most of my pinning to be on the back side, and that's because I'm gonna be sewing on the front. And if my pins are on the back, then my yarn that I'm using to sew is not gonna snag on the pins. So now I'm just inserting some safety pins. I could also use locking stitch markers rather than safety pins in a few locations, making sure to insert all the way through and catch the treetop underneath. Okay, let's turn it over and see if it looks okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, so that'll keep it in place. You can take these off, maybe add those to the back as well as a couple additional safety pins. Okay. I've got the yarn that was used at the fasten off already threaded onto a finishing needle, and I'm ready to begin sewing. I have quite a long yarn. I also have another piece of yarn that's tacked to the bottom, and I can use that if I need to. I'm gonna do all the sewing from the front side. I like to sew so that you don't see the stitches on the wrong side because they're gonna be in a different color than the block. So I just use the garter stitch bumps. I don't have to wind in any ends. I'm just gonna tuck them underneath the piece that's being sewn on just to hide them. And I'll turn it this way and begin the sewing. So what I do is I'm gonna take a stitch near where this yarn is emerging. Going to fold back the edge of the embellishment, the treetop that I'm sewing on, so I can see underneath, and I'm going to find a loop on the front of the garter stitch ridge just below and underneath the edge of my tree foliage, and then take a little stitch and come back up. And then I'll near where I came out, about a quarter of an inch away to a half an inch, I'll do the same thing. I lift the edge, I look for the garter stitch bump right below. I go through that, and then I go through just one stitch on the edge of my treetop and pull through. I'm not pulling too tight. So, and then I just keep doing that. I've got everything pinned, right? So I can just pull up the edge, look underneath, and find a stitch or a bump near the edge and insert my needle through that and then through the embellishment. This one is close. Sometimes I'm taking a stitch right next to the last one, and sometimes I'm going a little bit of a further distance. And just one strand on the edge of the embellishment. Just like that. Trying to be nice and consistent with my tension. And I'm not pulling too tight, which is why I left so much yarn, because the yarn needs to be able to integrate itself or look like it's part of the knitting, and if I pulled tight, the yarn that I'm sewing with would be much more visible. I like the Susan Bates needles because they're easy to thread, and they have the nice pointy end, which I use for a lot of different sewing maneuvers. And I also like that I can sew with a very short end, because the thread I'm working with can just slide down to the other end of the needle. Sewing with these goes very quickly, and it's very easy. See how it's looking so far. That's looking pretty good. I do enjoy the sewing part. I've always liked to do hand sewing because I feel like I have so much control, especially like as compared to like using a machine. Machines are great to make a quick work of anything, but I actually prefer a bit of hand sewing instead. I find it very satisfying and kind of relaxing as long as things don't get tangled. Okay, now I'm down on this kind of curved edge down here. This is all very well attached here, right? I've been taking a stitch about every ridge along here, so it's very, very well integrated and attached. It's kind of nice, given that this is a lighter yarn, it's a DK, to have some embellishments because they make the blanket a little bit thicker and warmer, which is kind of good. Maybe I wouldn't like that so much if it was a worsted weight. I think I'm gonna undo my extra strand of yarn down here just to get it kind of out of the way while I'm sewing. You can see I'm starting to run out of this yarn, right? It's getting a bit short. So once I get down here, I will abandon the use of this strand and start using this other one for the other edge, which is why I left two. So this is the first tree block that I'm doing. And it was a lot of fun making the treetop with all those baubles. I don't know if they look like a lemon tree or a tree that's in flower in spring. I don't know. Maybe they're lemons. Okay. All right, so now I think I will take one more stitch. And then I will just do a small tie off. And then I can just tuck this yarn end right underneath, because again, I don't have to weave it in because it can be hidden between the two layers very nicely and easily, except for all those pins are in the way. But other than that, okay, I've now tucked it back there. So now I can thread up this piece and finish the sewing with that. So in terms of how much yarn to leave for the sewing, you should leave between 3 and 4 times the length of the piece or the edge that you're planning to sew. And so since I left 2 pieces, right, one up here and one down here, I could draw the yarn around here to measure it once and then double it back, triple it, and even quadruple for the 4 times. And that's how I would get my yarn amount. I want to make sure that I'm just using one of the little bumps. I'll show you already what it looks like on the back. So I don't want to see any of this green yarn on the back, and that's why I'm only utilizing the surface bumps in my sewing. If I went all the way through, I would see, you know, green stitches on the back, and I don't want that because I like to turn it over and have the back look neat. These finishing needles come in all different sizes. There's like 5 different sizes in a package of them. And this is the medium, the blue one is the medium size for medium weight yarns. I've also been using the next size down on for some of the sewing on this blanket. If I split some of the yarn when I'm sewing, I don't worry about that. That's okay. Just as long as I don't insert my needle all the way to the back. That's what I want to avoid. I like to just pat it out and make sure that it's laying nice and flat. I've got it a little bit pinched with my thumb and my middle finger, just to hold the edge in place where it was pinned. Make sure nothing shifts. Make sure I'm using the same tension throughout for the best looking result. Okay, coming back up to the sloped area here, getting close to the top of the tree. Starting to get a little short on the yarn, but I think I'm going to make it. It's one nice thing about sewing is it's very easy to take it out if you don't like the way it looks and redo it. It's more complicated with knitting because you have to like rescue your live stitches. You can't lose them. I'm almost there. So that's where I started, right there. And I'm getting close. This particular tree seems to have like a slightly pointy top, but that's fine because trees sometimes have that. Okay. This tree is more of a abstract tree anyway. Okay, so there we have it. It has been sewn on. I don't know why I went through to the back there. Let me come back to the front. I'm gonna tie off. Just make a little small knot. And then I can just poke this in between the two layers carefully with my finishing needle, making sure that I'm not going through this area. And I'll just pull it out here. So I'm just burying it between the two layers because I'm not going to be able to weave it in on the opposite side, obviously. That's a long enough piece. Okay, that's the front. And then the back, I can now take off the safety pins. And it's looking pretty good. Can't see the sewing, which is good. Just looks like it did originally. So with this block, I just need to weave in a few more ends and then it'll be done. And I've got this piece that's a long sewing yarn that's wound up and pinned to the side just to prevent it from tangling. So there we have it. Nicely sewn on, not gonna go anywhere ever. I hope that helps you with your sewing. I just wanted to show you how I do it. Hi, thank you for joining me for this video. If you made it to the end, I bet you enjoyed it and found it useful. So please set your notifications bell, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.